Hello, welcome to my How to Beat series in Monster Hunter Rise, where I will cover each monster. These videos will cover many aspects of the monster, and the first section of each video will showcase the monster's attacks and animations, a sort of how-to if the nitty-gritty of math and some other numbers isn't really your thing. At least the good part is up front. So, let's get started. Today we have the Great Izuchi comes equipped with wide arcs and flips of the tail, even some straight line dashes. Luckily for us, they're pretty telegraphed and easy to dodge. The first attack is a wide swing of the tail, where the Izuchi covers almost 180 degrees. At the end, its tail will get stuck in the ground, giving us a few seconds to counterattack. A similar move is the flip variant, where the Izuchi will take a little jump back, it'll lift itself up, and then scream. Afterwards, it'll flip forward and slam its tail down, also getting stuck again. The hitbox for this is very small, so a quick roll or sidestep will work just fine. The final tail attack is a sweeping attack. It'll crouch and move its tail to one side, only to leap forward while spinning its tail around. This attack will knock you back, and it's generally best to roll backwards, unless it's raging, but we'll come back to that. Two close range attacks are the peck and claw attack. These attacks have very small range and are really quick. Sidestepping works to avoid these, but it's easier said than done. Be mindful of the Izuchi's spit attack, which it will spit, obviously. And it can travel a fair distance and it flinches. There's plenty of time to move out of the way though, so this attack isn't too challenging to avoid. And finally, the Izuchi's dash attack. It'll leap back and sway its arms around, and once it does this, it'll rush forward a fair distance, throwing its arms about with each step. The smaller Izuchi will also copy this, increasing the area we need to avoid, but regardless, try to move off to the side perpendicular to this attack. Now, remember when I said raging? The Izuchi, and every single monster for that matter, can and will enter an enraged state. Some forms are more obvious than others, and in the Izuchi's case, it can be pretty difficult to see. The most notable indicator is the bit of steam that will come out of its mouth. Other than that, the only way we can really tell visually is the shorter time between attacks and increased number of them. The final move the Izuchi will perform is only while it's raging, which is two sweeping arcs followed by one tail slam. While it's raging and goes for this maneuver, I found it's best to roll towards and past the Izuchi rather than backwards for the single sweep mentioned before. And that's it. Izuchi's moveset is incredibly simple but rapid and wide. Stay on your toes, wait for your openings, and be mindful of the friends it brings along. When it comes to the weaknesses of the Izuchi, especially for new players and characters, our options are extremely limited. But when we fight it again in high rank and eventually master rank, these choices expand significantly. As we can see here, generally speaking, slashing and blunt-based damage works better overall when compared to projectile-based damage. Now, this isn't the end-all be-all of damage. Everything works just fine. At the end of the day, it's better to use a weapon that you enjoy, and not one that has a larger value. As for elementals, thunder works the best, with water coming at a close second. Fire and ice are equal, barely beating out dragon damage. Again, if you're still in low rank, your elemental choices will be severely limited, so I wouldn't worry too much about the need for these damage types, they're just a little extra. Now, for the status effects. If you're new to Monster Hunter, status effects can be weird to understand, especially with bars that mean absolutely nothing to any of us. So, here's a quick tutorial of what all these bars mean as we go along. Initial resistance represents how much of the respective status we have to inflict in order for it to take effect. So, this is telling us we need to do a fair amount of poison-based damage with our weapons in order to poison the Izuchi. In this case, the threshold begins at 100, meaning we need to deal 100 poison-based damage to poison it. The bigger the bar, the more we need for it to work. Next resistance threshold tells us how much the next threshold is going to increase for each following poison after the first. So, the first threshold is 100, as previously mentioned, and each subsequent poisoning after the first will require another 90 points of poison damage. So, we will need 100, then 190, next is 280, and finally 370 poison damage for each respective poisoning. Maximum resistance represents where the respective status is capped in terms of resistance. Izuchi's poison resistance maxes out at 370, so after the 4th poisoning effect, it will require the same amount of poison damage for the Izuchi to be poisoned once more. Natural buildup degradation tells us how fast the bar for poisoning is going to drop when we stop attacking. Generally speaking, for all the monsters, each status will drop by 5 points every 10 seconds. So as long as you're attacking with the status effect, you don't really have to worry about this at all. Total damage, when applicable, tells us how effective the damage of the status is. Poison will deal a fair amount of damage, against Izuchi being 250 points of damage over the course of 25 seconds, or 10 points of damage every second. For stun, we start again with 100 base resistance, with the threshold increasing by 75 each stun until we reach a maximum of 400. Once stunned, the Izuchi is down for 10 seconds. Paralysis starts a little bit higher, 130. The threshold increases by 75 until we hit a maximum of 430. Once paralyzed, the Izuchi is locked down for 12 seconds. Sleep again starts at 100, the threshold goes up by a whopping 90 until it caps at 370. Once it's sleeping, they take a 40-second nap, giving us plenty of time to do whatever we may need to do. Exhaust starts at 150, going up by 45 each time, and eventually reaching a high max of 585. And finally, Blast starts at the lowest resistance, only 70. It goes up by 30 with each explosion, but it reaches the highest maximum of 670. Against Izuchi, each detonation of Blast deals a sturdy 100 points of damage. Every monster has a set number of parts, or sections of the body, that can be broken. Severing tails, breaking horns, and tearing wings are the most obvious ones. Calculating part damage is weird. Just know that everything we've talked about so far matters when calculating it, but in the end, unless you're aiming to go super try-hard, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Doing more damage is good, and exploiting weaknesses is good enough in most cases. Here we can see the individual health pools for the Izuchi's parts. Where there's a dash, the first number will usually lead to a flinch, with the second being a full break or sever, with the others generally being full breaks. I've also noticed that when these values reset from damage, they will lead to more flinches when the threshold is beaten again. I can't find quality information on how flinching works just yet. There could be a cooldown timer on it for all I know. Regardless, the total values here represent the total HP of the monster, leading to it being slain. These are averages from 5 individual hunts I did, and they'll vary depending on the number of players present, anywhere between 1.4 and approximately 2.5 times as much. It's also worth noting that when it comes to the Great Izuchi, the tip of the tail and head are the most vulnerable parts, so if pure damage is what you're aiming for, then those are your targets. Now, with all of the information out of the way, let's break it down to the need to know. When going toe-to-toe with the Great Izuchi, most of us won't have any issues, but if you are, be mindful of its rage state and do your best to react to the motions it makes before attacking. The smaller Izuchi are easy to take down, and it's probably best to do so if you have the chance. Slashing and blunt-based damage are generally better, but not by much, and if you have the means, using a thunder-based weapon is your best choice, or water if you happen to have that ready. When it comes to status effects, Poison is a solid choice due to the low threshold. Blast comes out ahead with the lowest threshold, but the build-up quickly increases over the duration of the fight, so be mindful of that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I'd appreciate a quick like on it. It helps it to reach more people and lets me know that you enjoy these types of things. I plan to do many more of these, so if you have a specific monster in mind that you'd like to see, let me know in the comments. They'll all be done eventually, but I know some monsters are more difficult than others. So, we have to start somewhere.